Right, 1, 2, 3.
Right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Economy and Development Select Committee on Thursday, 15th of July. Welcome to all members, officers, and any members of the public who might be watching in. We're going to alter the item or the list of items that we're going to deal with this morning. We're going to take agenda item number 6 out of order, number 5 out of order. But prior to that, could I have any apologies for absence to start with?
The only thing is, as I said to you earlier on, Chair, I will have to leave between 10:15 and 10:30.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Any further apologies, Hazel?
No, none received, Chair.
Okay, so any declarations of interest?
As and when, Chair.
Can I make one, Chair? I understand that there'll be a comment on behalf of Abergavenny Civic Society in relation to the LDP report. I should point out that I am a member of the society, but I took no part in the preparation of their statement. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Giles. Right, we will proceed swiftly then on to agenda item number 5, which is taking out of order because, as I said previously, some officers have to disappear to another meeting at 11 o'clock. So if I could ask for the presenter of agenda item number 5 to, that's Emma Davis. Fine, Emma Davis, good morning.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much, Chair. Good morning, all.
Morning.
This report is to provide you with an annual update on progress made in 2020-21 on Corporate Plan Goal B, which is Thriving and Well-Connected County, to ensure that members have an understanding of council performance and are able to scrutinise how well the authority has performed. Now, as you will be aware, the corporate plan is a 5-year programme that is aligned to a clear purpose of building sustainable and resilient communities. It identifies 5 priority goals, which also serve as the council's wellbeing objectives. And under each goal are a set of commitments to action, 22 in total throughout the plan, which the organisation is committed to delivering between now and next year, 2022. So the report has 2 appendices. The first one, Appendix 1, shows our performance management framework, which illustrates how all the various strands fit together in our performance reporting. As such, a lot of the information in the report will probably be familiar to you, having already been through the scrutiny process throughout the year. Appendix 2 provides a summary of activity and progress made in 2021 against the goal that probably most closely falls under the remit of the committee, like I say, Goal B. The past year has been an unprecedented one, and some of the aims within the plan have been paused or have progressed at a slower pace than intended. Now, each commitment has been allocated a progress rating, and an overall rating has also been given for the goal itself. So for this goal, there's a level 3 rating, which is adequate. It's probably important to point out at this stage that the ratings relate to activity and progress against the commitments themselves, so don't illustrate the significant activity that has been undertaken during the year to support the pandemic response. A couple of examples of the information in the report. The destination marketing has continued throughout the year, and although tourism has been affected considerably, the work to maintain Monmouthshire as a top tourist destination has been innovative and creative, alongside a lot of work to make our towns COVID safe when we have been able to welcome visitors back. Activity to develop employment opportunities had also continued throughout, with numerous apprenticeship schemes implemented for young people to help improve their employment prospects, and also for our existing staff to develop themselves to progress on their individual professional journeys. And finally, work is ongoing to improve rural transport in our area, with a number of developments underway and at various stages of planning and implementation. Now, ordinarily, this report would include performance information on a range of nationally set measures which are used by all councils in Wales. This would help to identify how Monmouthshire Council has performed, how our performance benchmarks with other councils in Wales. However, due to the impact of the pandemic, this information for 2021 is limited, so it doesn't provide an adequate level of detail to support the analysis of performance. But we have gathered this internally where it's available alongside some of our local measures, and this information is presented with additional information where the figures don't quite align with previous performance to provide a wider context and explanation. And finally, for information, a reported progress against all 5 of our priority goals will be presented to Council in September, with a requirement for publication by the end of October, as per the Local Government Wales measure. So that's everything from me, Chair. Open it up for scrutiny, and there's a number of officers here available for questions, should you have any.
Right, thank you, Emma. Obviously, Emma is the presenter of the report. She isn't the one who's going to answer questions on it. That's up to officers. So do you have any questions from members at the moment? No. Don't see any hands up. Richard Roden. Richard, if you'd like to ask your question.
Right, thank you, Chair. Setting aside COVID, where have you made the most progress and where have you made the least progress in the targets that were set? And in the areas of the least progress, what do you expect to do to get it back on track? Thank you.
Who's going to answer that one?
Sorry.
Chair, would you like me to come in?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Frances O'Brien, Chief Officer, Enterprise. I think that's quite challenging to actually be able to answer which ones have had more progress over the others, because obviously they're quite a spectrum of different priorities and actions that sit underneath the programme. I think taking into consideration the impact of COVID, the department has made quite significant progress where we can across the objectives that are set out in the tasks and actions within the goal. Things like, for example, the progress we've made with procurement, I think is a good example where we have made rapid progress in a short period of time, despite the impacts of COVID. So I don't know, Chair, whether you want to just undertake scrutiny of specific actions within the plan and the appendix there, or how you wish to go through the work we've undertaken in the year.
I was quite interested to know if there are any specific areas where you were having difficulty making progress, if you set aside the COVID aspect, and how you could actually move those forward. With any particular areas that you would have normally made progress that has not been affected by COVID, but you haven't been able to make progress for various reasons. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I'm going to see whether Mark and Kath want to comment on that, particularly in terms of areas within their service areas that they feel would have been able to progress more rapidly had it not been for COVID. Mark, do you want to come in first, and then we can bring Kath in then next?
Perhaps, Mark, before you answer that question, perhaps I can ask another question, and you can incorporate the answers both together. And that is, in the commitment to action, we see that we say the purpose of the document is to provide work alongside the replacement LDP in identifying, encouraging, and promoting development of suitable employment sites and premises, setting the scene for Monmouthshire's growing and inclusive economy. At the moment, we don't have any sites available at all, whether they be office sites or industrial sites. Perhaps you can answer why haven't we got any at all?
Yeah, happy to take that, Chair. Thank you. So in terms of that specific part of the question, then I'll come back to Councillor Roden's question, if that's okay, in a bit of a broader sense. In terms of employment land, you'll see further on in the report, there is still just over 40 hectares of employment land available within the county, identified in the current adopted local development plan. There is an issue with the range, the spatial sort of distribution of that is primarily in a couple of large sites in the south of the county. So one of our challenges is having that land supply in places like Monmouth and Abergavenny in particular, where we have got interest from businesses and we struggle to accommodate that. That isn't something that we can sort of magic up. The planning policies at the moment in place will support employment uses within settlements or potentially adjacent to. It's the replacement LDP that will provide us with those new sites and that range of locations to support those areas. So we have really good intelligence on the inquiries, kind of desires and things we haven't been able to meet from Kath's team, from James Woodcock and colleagues. So we've got some good intelligence about what's needed going forwards. It's a case of finding those sites in the LDP and proceeding with that process. That isn't something we can kind of circumvent. However, if there are proposals that come forward for sites immediately adjacent to the settlement boundary, they are things that we can consider. There's a couple of proposals that we're looking at the moment in other places. But again, some of our challenges are, some of those constraints. So Abergavenny is constrained at the moment, it's urban form in terms of the national park and floodplains. So we need to think carefully about where we go next and how we can accommodate that. So that's probably the detailed bit. Should I pass over to Kath in case there's anything she wants to add to that detailed question? Then I'll come back to Councillor Roden's question.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, Kath Fallon, Head of Enterprise Community Animation. I think there's two areas for us really. One is actually broadband redeployment, which has been sort of obviously slowed down further than we'd hoped. We were successful in obtaining funding through the Welsh Government's local broadband fund to undertake some works up in the Llantoni Valley area, for example, that's been a bit sort of delayed, but also there are issues there generally sort of taking COVID out of it really in terms of actually the works to actually sort of lay cables and things like that, and the way leaves and things like that we need to do if they put in sort of cables over land. So that's something that we're working to address as we go forward through our strategic broadband infrastructure group that we've got internally. We've also deploying through Broadway Solutions a wider network which is 5G carrier grade. So again, that's probably not moved as fast as we'd hoped. So therefore, the digital deprivation rates currently in the report is 12.5%, so are likely to be less than that. We're just awaiting the accurate figures, bearing in mind that the situation that we're coming out of. So that's one work in progress. The other thing we wanted to raise actually, and something that we're addressing over the summer, is a distinct lack of skills and actually an increase in vacancy rates in terms of our hospitality industry, for example. So as hospitality is reopened, desperate need for staff, but unfortunately those staff aren't coming forward, or if they are, they're finding it's quite a challenging area to work and they're deciding they perhaps not for them. So we've got a major campaign with our deputy leader over the summer period to try and encourage people to come forward, and our employment skills will actually and skills team will actually work with people to write CVs and help them with applications and things like that. So, and a lot of those issues are actually raised in our Business Resilience Forum, which is enabling us to really understand the issues that our businesses are facing on a daily basis, and our officers are coming together to see what we can do with immediate effect to try and solve that, similarly to the Shop Local campaign that's behind me. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Chair, if you'd like me to come back in terms of Councillor Roden's wider question.
Yeah, if you could do that, Mark.
Thanks, Chair. There's probably a few bits that's worth mentioning briefly. So the Chepstow study is mentioned in the report. We've now received that and have arranged a meeting with Chepstow members and stakeholders just across the border to brief them on that and bring that forward. So that's a little bit delayed to the timescale that we thought was going to take place. We'd hope to have that already by now, but it's progressing. I mean, you'll be aware of some of the wider context and things like the Welsh Government's current suspension of road building announcement. So we'll be thinking through how that might impact on some of the thoughts of the Chepstow study, but that's all work in progress. The highways programme, in terms of improvements and resurfacing, was delayed, but that was largely around, well, almost entirely around funding certainty. So until we had certainty from the Welsh Government that floods relief funding to reinstate roads that were damaged in the floods in 2019 and 2020, until we had confirmation that that was going to be carried forward into this financial year, we didn't know how much budget we had for the normal kind of road repairs and resurfacing programme. So we received that in late, I'm trying to remember, received it now, it was probably only 2 months ago, we finally got that confirmation. And then there's a further cabinet report last week relating to budget slippage. So now we've got that certainty, we can roll that out. And, you know, we've taken the clear message from council at the end of June about the need for better communication on that programme. So that's something that we're working on. The replacement local development plan, I won't talk about too much because we've got a separate session on that agenda item on that, but it was affected not just by COVID but also by the new population projections that the Welsh Government released. But that, I mean, that wasn't particularly a disaster because it gave us a helpful opportunity to refresh our view of the things involved in the plan in the context of Future Wales 2040, which was published in February, as well as thinking further about how things map out in the future. So that was quite timely in a sense anyway. And then I guess on the flip side to Councillor Roden's question in terms of I guess things that have been hindered by measures, COVID or otherwise, the reopening towns measures that we've put in place as a COVID response have opened up all kinds of potential opportunities in many ways, and there's a separate session at the end of this month to look at that via this scrutiny committee. And it's given us some chances to look at how we regenerate our towns in different ways, trial different measures, and now we're at the stage of thinking what might have potential to be a longer term change, and how we draw that up, engage with communities and businesses, and have that further conversation about the long term, which is particularly relevant now that relaxation of lockdown is being announced. You know, the thinking has changed from COVID measures to longer term high street regeneration. So that's a bit of a positive opportunity going forwards.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and the others. There's so many questions that you could ask about this area. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Mark. Do any other members have any questions on this report?
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Giles, fire away.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. First of all, I've got a question about the apprentice scheme that's referred to on page 302, and I wasn't quite clear, and I'd like to have a bit more information about the scope of the scheme. It seems to refer to apprenticeships within health and social care. What's the situation with the council's position in terms of offering apprenticeships for other areas of service? I know something we've talked about in the past, and it may well be something I've forgotten, but I'd like to know if we're looking to expand that. And the other point, it mentions there's 168 existing staff members who've signed up to undertake apprenticeships. Is that an error? I'd also, a second question, I'm trying to avoid it being planning related given the LDP conversation later, but I picked up on a point that Mark raised about business intelligence, and one of the things I've perhaps harped on about, and maybe harped on about too much, is the link between housing and employment. And what I'd like to know is, have we, as part of the evidence base or in general terms, looked at the link between people's homes, where they live, their patterns of travel to work, in relation to the existing businesses within the county, so we can see where people actually travel to and from. And I make no apologies for making the same points that I've done in previous full council sessions, that my experience of working for larger employers is that people travel from far and wide, and there's a very tenuous link between where they actually live and where they work. Yet part of the thrust of the LDP is providing houses for people and providing jobs for them locally, when that pattern doesn't seem to exist in my mind. So if you could maybe expand on that as well, please, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howard. In terms of the apprenticeships, the actual reference to the social care apprenticeships is actually, it was funded as part of Foundational Economy Core Fund. So hence why the focus is Foundational Economy Challenge Fund, I beg your pardon. So therefore there were 6 sort of apprentices within health and social care that were funded specifically through that particular model. So that's where that relates to. In addition, then there's obviously 20 apprentices throughout our organisation, which we're clearly looking to increase, because we see that as a real opportunity to grow our own. 7 of those have actually completed their study and moved into new posts, and then the additional staff members who are actually undertaking additional apprenticeships, so that additional learning. We're also working very closely with businesses to see how we can help them actually in terms of their recruitment of apprentices. So it's quite a wide-ranging scheme, really. The other thing I also wanted to link back into is clearly the issue we've got in terms of recruitment at the moment. So we're very much working as an employment and skills team, as a collective, looking at apprenticeships, but also where we can help businesses where they might be sort of facing other issues with recruitment, for example, hospitality. So we're very much working towards that. I'll pass over to Mark to pick up the other question. Thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Thanks, Councillor Howard. Sorry, I always call you Councillor Giles. Councillor Howard, for your question. I was going to ask if it's best bumped until the next agenda item, but we may as well cover it now in terms of how it relates to this question, this agenda item. We haven't got that survey information to my knowledge at the moment, unless Kath tells me otherwise. So it is something that would be good to do. I also note that the West of England is doing a survey of their businesses to understand how future working practices might change in terms of home or agile working or flexible working. So that's something that we're looking to commission and roll out, so we can understand how those different patterns might emerge in the future.
Mark, if I can come back to you here, in the last LDP workshop, there was a chap, was it Mr. O'Connor from Capita, said that he was undertaking a survey of the relationship between employment and where people lived. Was I correct on that?
Yeah, it's Mr. Dolan, his name was.
Dolan, not O'Connor, Dolan, yes.
That's all right. It's it's part of the same conversation. So we're looking at this just to prove we are doing it joined up way. We're having the same conversation of that data for the LTP as the RLDP. Right.
And Kath, if I can ask, the number of employees that we have within Monmouthshire County Council, sort of over 4,000 full part-time, full-time equivalent. We don't really seem to have very many, forgetting the apprentices who are already employed by us. We don't seem to have very many new apprentices. How many are we aiming to have by the end of next year, or the end of financial year?
I haven't got that figure to hand. However, I can say that we're actually working with individual departments on a daily basis to look at their recruitment requirements, and particularly in terms of apprentices, for example. We're also working with the Cardiff Capital Region graduate scheme. We have a new marketing graduate that started sort of, I think, about 6 weeks ago in that team. So we are actually looking to recruit as we go forward. So I think the picture will be very different next year when we come back to you, because obviously things have been, it's a slightly skewed year, as we know, last year, but certainly something we're looking to increase. I just really wanted to come back on the business survey, if that's okay. We are looking to go out sort of mid-September to survey businesses It's going to be a joint survey with our colleagues in tourism in terms of the business development management plan as well, but also looking at sort of what issues businesses are facing as they come out of COVID, what support they're going to need. And importantly for us to understand, as Councillor Howard said, in terms of where employees are working and what they may need in terms of co-working spaces that as well. As you may be aware, in terms of the Levelling Up Fund that we've submitted in for Monmouth, part of that is provision for co-working space. So it is essential that we understand the need for that. There has actually been a survey done through Welsh Government where people were invited to put a mark on a map, but that's something we want to build on locally, because clearly Welsh Government's ambition to move towards 30% of people working from home, whilst it's a benefit to people on a, you know, as we're all finding really, to do it on a full-time basis, people need that interaction with others. So we do recognise we'll need to provide, you know, space to do that. So not just as us as a local authority, but also working with our private sector colleagues as well. For example, there is a space in Abergavenny that's private sector owned. So making sure that we're, you know, we're covering the need for provision really. So thank you.
Thanks, Kath. Do any members have any further questions on this report? Say now or forever hold your peace. No, no. Thanks, Emma, for that report. I suppose, bearing in mind the pandemic and all the surrounding circumstances, the progress evaluation of adequate is probably about as good as we're going to get this year. So, thanks very much. Now, if we can then proceed with the next item on the agenda, and that's, we'll go back now to take it in order. We'll deal with the public open forum question, which I will read out under the new provisions, and that is this. The Council preferred strategy is not significantly different from that which the Council preferred in an options consultation earlier this year. The view of many who question whether the planned level of growth will lead to sustainable and resilient communities have been overruled. More importantly, we have not been told whether the Welsh Government accepts the Council's opinion that their growth strategy conforms to the Government's Future Wales National Plan as required by statute. We know from the Government's official previous comments that there was concern that the Council's growth ambitions would not comply with the then draft National Plan. The Abergavenny Civic Society and other community groups do not believe that the preferred strategy does conform, that the growth goes well beyond Future Wales expectations for supporting rural communities. To avoid later conflict and delay, should not the Council seek to clarify this uncertainty now, perhaps with agreement of a provisional band of compromise to be given precision later in the process that will lead to the adoption of a new plan? And that's sent in by Dick Cole, the Vice Chair of Abergavenny District Civic Society.
Thanks, Chair. Do you want me to respond to that, or does it go to members first for any additional questions?
Members first, I think, and then if you can respond to that. Members, do you have any observations on that comment from Dick Cole in the Public Open Forum? If not, I'll ask Mark to respond at this stage. No? Okay, Mark, if you can respond to that, thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, thanks, Dick and the Civic Society for the question. We had a letter from the Welsh Government in 2019. I'm just looking at it again now, 18th of July 2019, in response to the previous preferred options. We didn't have a response in January or February this year when we consulted on the growth options again, following the review of the data that I talked about earlier. So I'm slightly confused about what the Civic Society is referring to. We haven't had any written response from the Welsh Government that's commented on our growth level. The response that we did have in July 2019 raised concerns about two of the growth options, for the specific reason that they included new settlements. You'll probably recall back then we were looking at national planning policy, which said that individual local plans shouldn't include new settlements, which isn't the same to say must not. So we were proposing the potential for new settlements via 2 of the 5 growth options we consulted on at the time. Sorry, 2 of the 4, I think it was, in fact. So the Welsh Government raised concern that they believed that to be contrary to national planning policy, and said that our plan would risk being unsound if we continued with a reference to new settlements, and would only therefore have 2 growth options that are realistic. So that was all changed in January, February, when we consulted on new growth options. There was absolutely no comment in that letter from Welsh Government about the level of growth. We've met with them subsequently for an informal discussion about how our LDP needs to comply with Future Wales 2040, which is the National Development Plan that was adopted, or sorry, published in February this year. And again, there was no clear comment given then that there was a problem with our direction of travel. We talked through the relevant policies, so we said our understanding, which is in the documents that are before you today. So, you know, we understand we're not in a national growth area, we're not in a regional growth area in Future Wales 2040, but policies 4 and 5 of Future Wales 2040 make it very clear that we can and should meet our growth aspirations in the county that meet our needs. For example, affordable housing and aged balanced communities are both explicitly mentioned, and also rural communities and the rural economy in policies 4 and 5. So that's in Appendix 4 of the preferred strategy, where we set out how we believe we are in conformity with Future Wales and with Planning Policy Wales Edition 11. So we don't believe that that is a problem, and we haven't received any correspondence from the Welsh Government that tells us our growth level is out of kilter with Future Wales 2040. We believe they will be commenting on the preferred strategy. That's the normal process, although they have clarified with all local planning authorities they're having a lighter touch approach on this round of local development plans, so they aren't looking to comment on the detail of plans. It's for us to ensure conformity. That gets tested at examination, as members will be aware. It's also worth bearing in mind the tests of soundness that we have to comply with as well. So one of them is that our plans are suitably ambitious, and one is that it meets the needs that are identified, or the issues that are identified. So without sounding like a broken record, you know, our issues around affordable housing, around our age balance, and our ageing population, and securing employment within the county for young people to be able to live and work here. Obviously, there's the other issues that are extremely important at the forefront of our mind: the climate emergency. You know, we appreciate we've got beautiful landscapes, amazing heritage, and some fairly significant floodplains. But yeah, back to the question, we haven't had any written correspondence from Welsh Government telling us that our figure is at the moment or in conformity. So if there's any correspondence that the civic society is party to that we haven't received for some reason, then we'd be happy to view that and discuss it further.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Thanks for that response, that lengthy response. Thanks.
Sorry, Chair.
It's okay. It's a pleasure. If we can now proceed to agenda item number 4, that's the local development plan, scrutiny of the preferred strategy. Mark, that's you again.
Yeah, many thanks, Chair. So as members will be aware, we are currently out to consultation on the preferred strategy, which sets out the level of growth and the spatial distribution of growth for the plan. I'll pass over to Craig to talk briefly through the details. We'll probably keep it really short because, you know, you've seen the council presentation. We've had a workshop to talk through the concepts. So I think you're probably familiar with the details. So we'll do a very brief presentation for the benefit of any viewers who may have not seen either of those meetings, and then open up to questions. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to try and share my screen. And just to introduce myself, I'm Craig O'Connor, Head of Planning here in Monmouthshire. I'll just try and share my screen, 2 seconds. If someone could let me know that when they can see it, that would be great.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'll just quickly run through the PowerPoint presentation for the easy read guide for the preferred strategy. I know that members have previously seen this in workshops, and obviously you've seen the council papers on the 24th of June. So I'll try and be as brief as I can in terms of for people and audiences at home. So this slide just sets out what the LDP is in terms of it is a land allocation document which allocates pieces of land for certain types of development such as residential, employment, renewable energy, and also for protection as well. So the LDP will run for the periods, cover the period from 2018 to 2033. And it will have a host of planning policies, strategic and more detailed development management policies in which all planning applications will be determined in accordance with over that plan period. The bottom bubble graph just shows how the progression of the LDP and the stage we're at the moment. So we're currently at the preferred strategy stage, and we're out at the moment on consultation on the preferred strategy, which will run up until the 31st of August 2021. At the same time as we're out on consultation of the preferred strategy, we're also out on a second call for candidate sites for all of those things I just mentioned. So looking to engage with people in terms of what they want land to be used for those uses is either residential, employment, renewable, or for protection as well. So on the back of the consultation process, we are then obviously going to be reviewing all of the comments that come in and consider whether there's any additional amendments needed to the preferred strategy on the back of those comments, and then looking to take a paper to council in November just to get endorsement from full council as to whether it is the right preferred strategy given the consultation, and then working towards next year, working towards a deposit plan, and that deposit plan will have all the details in terms of what are the candidate sites to deliver the level of growth outlined within the preferred strategy and those detailed planning policies then, and then on to examination and adoption 2023. So just as a quick reminder, Mark mentioned in terms of those key issues, I'm sure members are fully aware of these now in terms of where we are in the process. But some of the key issues that we're looking to address as part of the replacement local development plan is the high average house prices in Monmouthshire, the lack of affordable housing, the need to reduce the out commuting within the county, the need to balance our demography. So we have an ageing population in Monmouthshire. And we need to look to balance that in terms of that 20 to 40-year-old cohort particularly. We also have significant areas of protection in terms of our landscape and heritage assets, which we need to protect. Challenges in regard to rural isolation, and the significant one, which is obviously a nationwide and a global issue in terms of tackling climate change and ensuring carbon reduction. Really, really key in terms of a key objective of the LDP. So in terms of the vision for Monmouthshire, this is the vision for by 2033. Will be a place where people want to live, work, and also enjoy recreational time and space. It's a better place to live, a healthier place to live, and a sustainable place to live. This vision was reviewed last year in light of the impact of the pandemic, and a paper was taken to Cabinet to confirm that this vision and the issues and objectives were still clear and well defined given the impact of the pandemic. And I think, well, it did outline that the vision is still the right vision for Monmouthshire, and those issues and objectives are still clearly there, and if anything have been heightened by the impact of the pandemic in terms of the affordability, homelessness, the need to regenerate our towns and centres. All of these things are still clear and still significant in Monmouthshire. So in terms of the preferred strategy, which we're currently out on consultation on, these are the broad figures and that strategic high level of growth that is being sought, and we are going out to communities on and discussing this with communities now. So the preferred strategy outlines we want to grow Monmouthshire between 7,605 to 8,366 homes, and that is looking for that is a mix of existing commitments, existing sites which are in the LDP, windfall sites. We were looking for new sites to deliver 3,658 homes over that plan period. And we're looking for these homes to deliver a wide range of market homes suitable for younger age and also for people downsizing as well. So it's not just we're looking to have some sort of housing mix policy, which we're still working at the detail of, but having those conversations with developers of having housing mix policies to try and intervene in that market and ensure that we do deliver for all age groups. The plan also provides approximately 2,450 affordable homes, and of that 1,489 of those will be on new allocations. I think it's very evident in terms of the need for affordable housing in Monmouthshire, and that again has been heightened given the impact of the pandemic. People living in shared accommodation, and there's over 2,000 people on the waiting list. So that need for affordable housing is crucial to this plan, and we're seeking to deliver that potentially on 50-50 sites, 50% affordable and 50% open market, in line with what Future Wales is outlining in terms of the need to provide that affordable housing across the county. So that policy 7 in Future Wales is quite key to that. And then also lastly, in terms of employment and the economic generation of the plan, we want to provide the planning policy framework to enable the provision of additional 7,215 jobs. So we will allocate land to bring employment and commercial opportunities forward, in terms of, particularly in terms of B1 land uses, offices, industrial, etc. But also we're very mindful that the plan is there to create and enable those jobs to be created. We don't have to allocate land to provide all of those jobs. We all know that we are working significantly different from when we were in 2019. And the Welsh Government's view is that we need to be looking for 30% of people working from home. So the question is, does that need to be within, does the homework need to be within Monmouthshire? And we need to think about 20-minute neighbourhoods, you know. If people are working from home, they can invest in their local area, local town centres, you know, really ensure that we have those unique 20-minute neighbourhoods within Monmouthshire in our primary settlements in particular, people being able to work from home, and that is in line with what Welsh Government want to achieve. But also to have those enabling policies in terms of tourism, industrial, commercial, our town centres, retail, you know, have a flexibility and adaptability to ensure that we can create jobs. So where will the growth go spatially? So this is what the strategy is outlining in terms of our spatial strategy. We want to provide proportional, sustainable development across our settlements. 58% of that growth will be allocated to primary settlements in the most sustainable locations in Monmouthshire, linked to transport hubs and public transport, sustainable public transport. So Abergavenny, including Llanfoes, Chepstow and Monmouth are our primary settlements, so 58% of that will go in that location. If you look at the bottom there, in terms of new allocations, that'll be 2,365 within those settlements. Sevenside, also in terms of the cluster along the M4 with those settlements, that would take 28% of this development, of this growth, sorry. And then rural settlements slightly lower than that in terms of 9%, and secondary settlements 5%. We see all the detailed figures with regards to allocations is within the preferred strategy documents. This slide just outlines in terms of the consultation process, and we've outlined these indicative images just to engage conversation with communities, to try and get a view from people and where they would like this growth to go, if anywhere, in terms of each settlement. So we've got the 3 primary settlements there and the Sevenside region, looking at, you know, engaging in a conversation. Is that if development is to come in line with this growth, where should it go and where should it be located and where's the most appropriate place for it to be? Really want to have communities to have that voice in that say. So it is worth noting that some of these areas are also being considered for protection areas as well. So there's loads of things to consider as we run up to the deposit plan next year. And these are just points of discussion. Certainly no decisions have been made about which ones are the most sustainable. That is what is going to be being conducted on the back of the consultation, the back of the second call for sites. So this just outlines the strategic policies, the 18 strategic policies in the preferred strategy, which are seeking to address those key issues which are outlined on this slide. So really looking to look about where this growth will be located spatially, high levels of placemaking, infrastructure provision, really looking to address climate change, enhance that green infrastructure and landscape, and create that employment piece in terms of enterprise in places, visitor economy, rural enterprise, and allocate those employment sites as well. In terms of the LDP going forward, we're very, very keen on ensuring the high quality of the LDP. So we want to ensure that, unlike previous LDPs, we have a placemaking approach interweaving within that local development plan and master planning some of these big strategic sites. I know Swansea have done some excellent work in this area in terms of having master plans interwoven into the planning policy. So that's certainly something that we want to pick up on and want to look at. We want to create and ensure we have the most sustainable development. So we want to allocate the right land in the right place, and that is key, particularly with regards to our businesses and our commercial ventures. We want to have those conversations with them about where they want to be located within Monmouthshire and allocate that right land in the LDP. In terms of the climate change agenda, we really want to be on the high end in terms of ensuring that we do have low carbon homes. We want to ensure we have car charging on each property, renewable energy, solar panels on each scheme within the preferred strategy documentation. And when we're going out for the second call for sites, there is a key viability document in relation to climate change, and which clearly outlines our very, very high standards of above and beyond what is being required by Welsh Government at the moment. We also want to create housing mix. So as I said, we want to intervene in that market, in the open market, by ensuring that we do have a mix of properties for younger families and also for people downsizing as well within Monmouthshire. So 2 3-bedroom terrace, semi-detached bungalows. We do want to address that mix and address that balanced demography. Economic prosperity, ensuring we have the right land in the right places, I've already said, and creating that enabling framework. Affordable housing, have our key policies, improving sustainable transport, and protecting and enhancing our recreational space. We all know how important it is to have that recreational space on your doorstep on the back of COVID. Investment in the public realm, and also ensuring ecological resilience and green infrastructure, enhancing our green infrastructure. We have a green infrastructure strategy. How can the LDP align with that and ensure that we do better in terms of ecological resilience and green infrastructure, and digital places as well? And people are going to be working from home. How can we ensure that people are well connected and have access to the internet? So in terms of the next steps, as I said, we are on the consultation at the moment on the preferred strategy and the second call for sites. That'll run until the 31st of August. There's significant information and background papers on the planning policy website pages, so please engage with that as much as possible. And I said on the back of that, then we'll be looking to bring a paper which reviews the consultation responses and ask council to seek to endorse this preferred strategy in November at the end of this year. And then next year, in next summer 2022, we'll be out with the deposit plan, which will have those key policies within it and exactly which sites we'll be looking to take forward to deliver this level of growth. So that's just a quick rundown of the preferred strategy, Chair, and hopefully that is, I'm just giving you a brief overview for everyone listening. Happy to take any questions or queries now.
Thanks, Craig. Members, do you have any questions at this stage? I've got some.
I certainly have one, Chair, whenever.
Fine. Jez, if you'd like to go ahead.
Yeah. I've sort of raised this before, and you know, we've got a laudable sort of strategy, I think, coming together. But I look at the affordable and housing mix and the type of housing we're going to build, and I think to myself, well, what are we doing to actually bring those kind of house builders to the county? You know, what are our plans? You know, do we have any preferential treatment for people who are actually building the kind of housing that we want? You know, if we don't go out to them and sell Monmouthshire to the people that we want in here, we're going to get the same stuff that we always get from the big five, which, you know, whilst we can't control who people sell their land to, it would be better for us to encourage other greener house builders to come to the county. So, you know, what have we got in the pipe to make ourselves as a county more attractive to the kind of people we want to come and build here?
Thanks, Chair. Do you want me to answer that question?
Yes, please.
Thanks, Councillor Becker. Yeah, it is a really good point. I guess there's a couple of aspects to it. One is the detailed policies that will be in the deposit plan that will set out what's required, you know, whether it's the big five PLCs or someone else building. We can't control with the private lands, privately owned land, we can't control who they may be engaging with, but we could look to try and make some of those contacts and connections, as you mentioned. So we've already met one company in particular, Zero Homes, to understand what they're doing in Tonypandy and other parts of Wales and in Cardiff. The name sort of gives a bit of a clue, and they're looking at how they can make homes zero carbon ready. And I know that Councillor Becky, you've kindly put us in touch with or highlighted to us a couple of companies that do housing in a different way, one in sort of an environmental sense and one around a community build sense. So that is something we'd like to pursue further with you. The other aspect is where, not with my planning hat on, but in a wider council sense, it's our land. Then colleagues in the States will be looking at if the planning authority allocates any council land in the plan, then the council as landowner can consider who they partner with or sell land to bring forwards something that meets our wider aspirations. So there's the two elements really. So one separate from planning as a landowner, if sites are allocated that are in the council's ownership, and one as a policy approach. And then I guess the third arm is probably what you're hinting at slightly as well, that kind of informal making connections piece, which could do some further discussion.
Thanks, Mark. Giles, if you'd like to come in with your question.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it would be unusual, wouldn't it, if I didn't ask a planning related question. I'm going to try and not ask the same things again, because I know I'll get the same answer. But the one thing I don't feel as though I've ever had a reasonable answer to is the question of the high average house prices, and that's been quoted a lot as one of the reasons we need to enable more growth to meet the needs of our communities and those who aspire to own their own home, etc. But I'm still convinced that the reason those average prices are higher is because we have a large number of larger houses in the county and other areas don't. And I haven't yet seen anything presented to us or any evidence in support of the preferred strategy that actually looks compares like for like and looks at the cost of new houses. Say, for example, something I've done is compared prices of new developments across Bridgend, the south part of RCT, in Cardiff, where there's a lot of development taking place around the Garden Village and over towards Craigie, and with Monmouthshire and Torvine in the Sebastopol area. But I have found there isn't actually a massive difference between the costs of various house types, and I just fear that this impression we're creating about average house prices in Monmouthshire isn't a realistic one, and it's being used to justify wrongly used to justify something when the evidence points to a different outcome. The other issue I want to talk about is the jobs. 7,215 in the presentation, and it links back to my earlier question answered by Kath and Mark about the business intelligence, because the question I have to ask you is, well, who are those jobs for? We can't control who employers employ. We can't control where they live. We have very little control over the employment levers at all, and Monmouthshire's a very good example of that in terms of where people live, where they travel to, or where they work from home. So who are those jobs actually for? Because until we can control that people have to live in Monmouthshire to have those jobs, then again that isn't really serving the purpose that it sets out to. The third question then is to talk about the imbalanced demographics in Monmouthshire, and what I am mindful of is that South East Wales is a relatively small, well connected and dense area, obviously with the exception of parts of Monmouthshire, and the fact that we have a higher older population doesn't necessarily, it isn't meaningful in my point of view, in that if we weren't Monmouthshire and we were back in the Gwent days, would we, if we were looking at a new development plan, would we be concerned, for example, that within Monmouth there were 50% of residents of retired age, but maybe in the Blaenau Gwent area that figure was 30. Would we be so concerned then about ensuring that Monmouthshire was a microcosm of something that much of the Wales picture, as it were? I'm mindful that I'm not probably explaining myself very well, but the fact is Monmouthshire is a very small county, and does it really matter in the great scheme of things, given connections where people work, where they go for their leisure, etc., that we have some disparities between older people and younger people, and those who work and those who seek to live out of the county or leave the county when they're younger. So if we're going to have maybe a bit more explanation about around those areas, I would be grateful.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Howard. I picked up 3 questions there really. So one around house prices primarily, one around employment and where the people live/work, and one around demography. So I think that will cover it. If I do the first and the last one and pass to Craig for employment, if that's okay. So in terms of affordable housing or house prices rather, we're not trying to argue sort of a perfect supply and demand type economic argument whereby build more houses and the price of everything falls. I think you'd have to build a huge number more than we're proposing to have any meaningful impact. But on the flip side, if we have a really low level of growth or build virtually nothing, it will only force prices up because there is demand and the supply will be stripped. But most importantly, we'll end up delivering barely any affordable housing when we know that we've got 2,000 homes on our waiting list. So it's kind of both of those angles that are key drivers really, and it does link then into demography. I understand the point made in terms of where our borders are, and if the border was drawn differently, would we be thinking the same? But I think we would. The COVID's taught us a lot about sustainable communities where younger people or people are able have been helping and caring for older people and the most vulnerable, and that's literally been a lifeline for our communities. So if you project that forward and imagine we're going through this in 10-15 years and look at what those demographic charts show, would be in really quite a dire situation without the ability of our communities to be mixed and have that sustainability in a social sense and an economic sense with our workforce as well. So I guess it is one of our ambitions, one of our objectives, but ultimately is the council's plan. And I guess I'll throw it back to members potentially. Would you be happy with your children, your nieces, nephews, whoever, being unable to live in the community where they've been brought up and want to live because there simply is no option and they have to go and live in Blackwood or Newport or Evervale or somewhere? Nothing against any of those places, but if they want to remain in their home community, I feel like it's incumbent on us really to make that happen where we can, and delivering a level of growth to enable that with affordable housing is within our gift. I think that's probably all I'll say on those points for now. I'll pass over to Craig for the employment question and anything he wants to add on housing or demography.
Thank you, Chair and Mag. Yeah, so I agree with Councillor Howard in terms of we certainly don't hold all the levers with regards to where people can live and work, and no one can control that, can they, in terms of people movement. I think if we break down exactly what the replacement local development plan is, it is a land use document. It is allocating land for those uses. So I think as long as we ensure that we have that employment land, that commercial space in the right location, and that is about having those conversations with Indigenous businesses and any business which want to come in Monmouthshire, providing those opportunities for the citizens of Monmouthshire by having that right land allocated in the right place. That's certainly what we need to do. And in terms of the working from home elements, I mean, the COVID has shown us over the last 15 to 16 months, does it really matter where your base of work is? people now working all over the country in terms of where their actual central location base is, but they're working from home. They're being far more sustainable by reducing their carbon footprint from working from home, and ensuring that they are using their local areas a lot more, which I think Monmouthshire can capitalise on in terms of ensuring that we do have those settlements which are self-sufficient. And I picked up on in terms of the 20-minute neighbourhoods, being able to access your working from home, your lifestyle, your recreational space, where you shop and go out for coffee and eat, etc. Monmouthshire has all of those potentials to have those perfect 20-minute neighbourhoods with those sustainable settlements that we do have. So that is really key. But I do take the point we don't have all the levers with regards to the jobs, but I think as long as the LDP allocates the right sufficient amount of land for businesses to be able to come in and to prosper here, and also to ensure that we have enabling policies and adaptable, flexible policies to support tourism. We want to have allocations for tourism within the county. We also want to ensure that we have enough land for renewable energy schemes. So it's about ensuring that we do have those planning policy frameworks to be able to adapt to all of those aspects. And I think there's a lot of work around how people are going to be working in the future. So you've got anywhere workers where people are flexible and adaptable and be able to work anywhere and a bit more agilely. So such as council workers, such as myself, I mean, we are flexible. We don't have a direct work base. We can work anywhere. And then you have those place-based workers, like factory workers, retail workers, where they do need particular sites to move to, and the LDP needs to allocate the land for those people to go to. And then there's the further agile workers in terms of your on-the-go workers, like electricians, plumbers, ground maintenance people. They have different places to go to work as well. So it's about creating an LDP which enables all of those things to happen, to reduce people's carbon footprint and to create the space and the policies for those jobs to be created. And from the conversations we're having already with developers and land promoters, we certainly can look to allocate that land. If I may as well, Chair, just to pick up on a couple of other comments that have been made, particularly Councillor Becker, I put in the chat, but for people at home, in terms of raising the bar with regards to climate change agenda and low carbon. So it's not just about looking towards sustainable homemakers, the more traditional homemakers. It's also about pushing up the big five as well. So our viability note and our climate change note does look to go higher than Welsh Government's targets at the moment, and really push developers and the big five to deliver on delivering low carbon homes. And that's certainly what we're seeking as part of the LDP. So just to pick up on that one point, and with regards to the point on affordability, I do think it's key about this housing mix policy to control the footprint of the property. That is how properties are valued, and if we ensure that we have the right proportion of smaller properties, that will have an impact on affordability ultimately, because we are offering that choice for citizens. At the moment, I think there's this challenge of, are we only offering one type of product, and we need to deliver for all ages and demographics. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Craig. I've got a couple of questions here. We're looking to build 8,366 houses and create 7,215 jobs. Welsh Government are expecting 30% of us to be working from home or from near to our homes. Does that mean we're going to actually have to build bigger homes to provide facilities in those homes for offices? And is there not a dichotomy between Monmouthshire County Council declaring a climate emergency and building all these homes and creating all these jobs? That's the first question. Next question is, we're looking to find 43 hectares of industrial commercial land that may or may not be in the right place. Do we have the appropriate compulsory purchase powers to enable us to find that land in areas that we actually want the jobs to be created? And finally, I don't see anywhere in the strategy to cater for restrictions on housing. I have mentioned previously what Section 157 of the Housing Act 1985, which helps local people purchase local properties. It's used extensively in Devon and Cornwall and holiday areas, but also in the Cotswolds and in North Norfolk. Have you considered adopting those policies within this scheme? Thanks.
Thanks, Chair. Happy to start answering those questions. And Craig, if you've got anything to add, then by all means join in, or Kath. So in terms of, I guess the core question there really is, have we got a dichotomy between the climate emergency declaration and the growth that's proposed? I mean, that is, you know, a really important question to work through. I would suggest that we don't. I mean, in terms of the amount of the county that's currently defined as built urban, it's currently about 3%, and the growth that we're talking about will take it to about 3.4%. So it's still a very small proportion of the county in terms of landscape or agricultural land, or you know, just natural environment. It's very much about the points that Craig was making at the beginning about building the right things in the right places. So having those 20-minute neighbourhoods, having the amenities, reducing the need to travel, and then active travel and public transport. So it's about having them in the right places, about people being able to behave in different ways, having the ability to work from home or employment hubs where people's jobs suit that. I mean, clearly it's not applicable to every profession or every form of industry, but where it can happen, that can make a huge difference. And then the standard of what's built that Craig touched on earlier as well. In terms of the employment land, you know, do we have the right stuff in the right places? That's, you know, very much the purpose of the new RLDP, to identify those sites, having a mix of sites, identifying needs and where we can supply. We're currently out to consultation, but also a call for candidate sites. So we'd urge anyone that has land that could be useful for employment purposes, and we've had a couple of really good meetings in the last fortnight about employment land, to come forward and put their land forwards. You know, it's all in a very important part of the mix. And also I guess I just stress as well, we're talking in the preferred strategy consultation about strategic options for growth of the 3 main towns and 7 sides. Just to stress that is employment and housing growth. It's not just about houses. In terms of the last part of the question, restricted occupation policies, that is something that we can look into when we get to the detailed policy stage. That's something that will factor into the deposit plan at a later stage. And I think I mentioned in the previous meeting, we're looking at what Gwynedd is doing as a Welsh council, although their primary issue is second home ownership, which is not a significant challenge in Monmouthshire. We are looking at whether there's policy approaches there that we can take, and it's also something that the Welsh Government's doing some detailed work in at the moment, primarily again around Welsh language matters in North Wales, but it is looking at policy approaches and pilots for ways of ensuring homes for local people. So we'll be working with them on that as well. Craig, I'm not sure if there's anything you wanted to add.
Thanks, Mark. I asked about compulsory purchase powers. Do we have those?
Oh yeah, sorry, Chair. Craig, do you want to cover that one?
You're on mute.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have CPO powers to enable if we want to, if we need to. And I think with regards to this plan, in terms of delivery, particularly with regards to the delivery of affordable housing, there might be situations where that might be needed to deliver that level of affordable housing. But yeah, we certainly do have that. I think you also mentioned, Chair, about those local connections in terms of housing for local people and for local connections. We are reviewing those policies with our housing colleagues in terms of what is going to be needed moving forward. We do have a local register where we allocate those affordable houses to local people in local need on that register, but also looking at if we can tie some policies more widely than that as well, and connecting to that local need. In terms of some of the other comments that were made with regard to the dichotomy between climate change and house building, I would suggest that they're not against each other in terms of these houses that these homes that we're looking to build for people are the most sustainable homes that we've ever built in Monmouthshire. And as I've already said, we are pushing the bar in Monmouthshire in terms of that low decarbonisation agenda by ensuring these homes are fit for purpose, and really the people who will live in them will have reduced fuel bills, addressing energy poverty. So, you know, they are going to be the most appropriate type of properties that we can ever build within Monmouthshire, and that directly relates to climate change in terms of that energy output, electric car charging, allocating the right land in the right places so people don't have to travel and move so much, in terms of Welsh Government's transport hierarchy, encouraging people to walk to places and to pedestrian links and cycling links. These are all critical to ensure in terms of how we address climate change. And the LDP is one of the council's key documents, I would suggest, to do that. We're working with the Carbon Trust as well in terms of looking at renewable energy sites. So, you know, without allocating that land within the LDP for renewable energy sources, how are we going to create that energy in a sustainable fashion? So I think the LDP is one of the council's key tools to addressing climate change. And these are going to be the most sustainable homes and employment sites that we are going to be developing. So they will be fit for purpose. You could argue that the existing housing isn't addressing climate change, and it is hard to retrofit some of these renewable energy schemes to those sites. So yeah, I don't think they are in conflict. I think the LDP is a key policy document to address climate change head on.
Well, thanks, Craig and Mark. Members, if anybody's got any question, I speak up. Otherwise, we'll move on.
Chair, for me.
Right, Richard.
Thank you. I'm very, very concerned about the impact of things like phosphates, nitrates and sewage going into the watercourses of the Usk and Wye. And considering the recent impact statements from the Welsh Government, it really does look as though this could derail or actually stymie aspects of our LDP. I wonder if you could give me some details about what's going on in the background and some confidence that we will actually be able to deliver what we have planned. That's the first question. Secondly, in terms of affordable housing, I'm interested to know how it's funded. Does it actually have an impact on the price of market houses in the same settlements? Thank you.
Chair, would you like me to take this question?
Yep, if you carry on, yeah.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Roden, for your question. Phosphates, yes, it is a significant issue in Monmouthshire at the moment, and it is having an impact in terms of development proposals and planning applications going through the process at the moment. It's having an impact on the delivery of affordable housing, on commercial enterprises, on community facilities. Basically any development which increases wastewater. So it is an issue, and it has been flagged in terms of a risk assessment within the appendix for the papers for the preferred strategy in terms of how we move forward. And we want to ensure this development obviously doesn't have an adverse impact on our water quality in our rivers and on the phosphate levels, and we need to find solutions and with regards to the infrastructure and how we are able to deliver this level of growth and ensure that we don't harm the water quality. We are in significant conversations with Welsh Water, Welsh Government, Natural Resources Wales, and how to resolve this issue. I think it's quite clear that there aren't any definitive solutions at this stage. However, in Monmouthshire, one of the key aspects of this is that we don't have the phosphate stripping capability in some of our most sustainable settlements in the north of the county, so namely Abergavenny and Llanfoist and Monmouth Wylesham. We don't have in those public drainage systems any phosphate stripping capability, which I believe is the right way to ensure that we treat this wastewater before it enters our rivers in Monmouthshire. So we are discussing with Welsh Water the ability to enhance and improve the infrastructure within their asset management programme 2025 to 2030, which will then enable this development to come forward. We're also going out and reviewing whether we can have the council can address any sort of ecological solutions, speaking to consultants about what is needed in terms of being able to bring this level of growth forward. In the appendix, in the risk assessment, we did consider 4 different options as to whether we should continue with the progression of the LDP or pause or stop, given the issue of phosphates and water quality. However, as you can see in that risk assessment, it's quite clear that if we did pause or did stop, we're at risk of not addressing these key issues within Monmouthshire with regards to affordability, with regards to the economic challenges within Monmouthshire, with regards to the balanced demography. So stopping and pausing, we lose that momentum, we lose that drive to find solutions, to have those positive, engaged conversations with those key statutory consultees. So as a council at this stage, we do think it's the right thing to keep on moving, to work with those with those groups, with those third party sectors, to find solutions to these problems, which is affecting deliverability on the ground at this stage. So I am positive and optimistic that we can certainly address this issue and we can ensure that development doesn't harm water quality and is in line with Natural Resources Wales's guidance. And I think key to that is going to be improving our public drainage system within our most sustainable settlements. I don't think we need to do it on all settlements across Monmouthshire, but certainly in our most sustainable settlements, we need to do that.
Okay, thanks, Craig.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, I was going to say, are you happy with that?
Yeah, in the main, I just wondered how much phosphate stripping costs. It's not a technology that I'm familiar with. That was one thing, and then there was also the aspect about housing costs, market support for affordable. If that's, I just don't know the economics of it. I'm just curious if you could possibly help with that. Thank you.
Yeah, do you want me to say those 2 elements? I believe in terms of phosphate stripping in one of the, so to add that as a technology to one of the existing wastewater treatment plants, we're talking in the realms of a couple of million per plant. We've got I think 34 wastewater treatment plants throughout the county, only one of which has phosphate stripping at the moment. That's the one in Raglan. The south of the county, we don't have this problem, as I think Craig mentions, where it goes out into the tidal area of the Usk, so it goes into National Wastewater Works in Newport. Sort of Shire Newton, Chepstow, Sevenside, we don't have this issue. It's the northern sort of 2/3 of the county where we have the challenge. So yeah, it's not cheap at all. And so for us, our key discussion is around trying to get Welsh Water to bring forward their asset management plan proposals for a couple of key sites that will support this growth, and the conversations we're having with them at the moment are really positive. They've been very helpful so far. In terms of the other aspects of your question with affordable housing, there's a few ways in which affordable housing is delivered, but the primary one of focus for us at the moment is via the planning system. So I'm not sure that there's any evidence that says it affects the price of market housing per se, but it's certainly undeniably an issue in terms of the viability of development. So, you know, developers are looking at land purchase costs, build costs, and their sales values. So they obviously lose a market sale on each plot where there's affordable home, and they will tell us that it costs money to actually build. So they'll say that there's a hit on the development of the affordable home, and also kind of a loss in hope value, I guess they call it. You know, so if plot number 3 is affordable, not market home, they've lost the market house. So they will certainly say that it changes their costs. You know, arguably in making that balance with all the other changes and policy requirements, they're making sites stack up. So I guess potentially there is an impact on market homes. Although if we introduced a policy tomorrow that we wanted 0 affordable housing, would the house builders reduce their house prices? I don't think so. So it's partly market led in that sense. I guess the other aspect to mention is the Welsh Government funding that plays part. So social housing grant is there. There are no firm proposals that I'm aware of from the Welsh Government at the moment, but the Future Wales document that they've published talks about 47 or 48% affordable homes in South East Wales in the first 5 years. And given that that growth is intended to be focused on Cardiff, Newport and the valleys, where you'd be hard pushed to get anywhere near those values, you know, that percentage, I can only imagine that there will be significant public subsidy sitting alongside to help make that happen in the right places and unallocated sites. So I think there's an element of unknown in that, but I cannot see how the Welsh Government's ambition will be achieved via the usual routes of delivery, you know, wholly relying on the market sector and sort of Section 106 agreements. So I think there'll have to be other funding mechanisms in play to make that happen. I hope that answers your questions, Councillor Rowe.
Thank you, Mark. It does. I'd like to see further evidence of the pricing structures, just out of my own curiosity. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark. I'm going to call Giles back in a second, but whilst I think about it, surely if we introduce a firm policy saying that a certain percentage of affordable housing must be provided on each site, when the developer is in negotiation with the landowner, the developer is going to know what the base cost of each unit is going to be. So he will then, or the developer will then factor in the negotiations with the landowner, the fact that he's got to make this provision. So instead of paying £150,000 or £1 million per acre, they reduce it to cater for the fact that they've got to provide affordable housing. And that's the one point. And the other point I was going to make to do with Welsh Water, it's all very well having phosphate stripping facilities in each of the sewage plants. It doesn't help when Welsh Water illegally dumps sewage into the rivers. That's the other point I was going to make. Giles, if you'd like to come and ask your question now.
Yeah, thanks. Just a quick follow-up, and Mark touched on it in his last comments about the 48% affordable housing requirement, and I'm just going back to the comments at the last council and our 8,000 houses over the period of our plan reflected about just under a quarter of the whole regional housing requirement in future Wales, and given that our contribution towards that housing requirement would be so great, how on earth would we get anywhere close to 48% of them within the first 5 years of future Wales being affordable? I also wanted to ask a little bit more about the phosphate stripping, and it really is an absolute mess, and I can't see how it could be funded from developments without, certainly the cost is absolutely enormous. Have Welsh Government given any indication that they're looking to fund those upgrades, perhaps in line with emerging development plans? Because the other thing that I'm always mindful of is that Natural Resources Wales' position is that the first priority is to drain to existing main sewers, and if we start talking about then developments having their own separate facilities to strip phosphates, to go into all issues and about, I suppose, monitoring compliance and what have you, and I just think that possibly makes the situation even more complicated. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Giles.
Sorry, I was struggling with the mouse buttons there. Chair, do you want me to come back and answer aspects of those questions and pass to on aspects? In terms of the point that you were making around sort of the different factors, I guess, in development costs, yeah, part of the case is that you know, if there's additional costs of affordable housing or improved climate emergency related energy efficiency measures, better quality of build, or other infrastructure like EV chargers that building regs are going to require, then that comes off certain places. So it either comes off the developer's profit, it comes off the land value, or they'll try and negotiate it off other contribution packages, so other things we're asking for via Section 106. So that needs a lot of extra work. The viability process is changed, so we need to gather that information up front from developers. So by the time we're at deposit plan, we have a clear idea of viability and deliverability of the sites. It is an easy argument, I guess, to make that, you know, we can just shave it off the land value and the land becomes cheaper. The flip side to that argument, the developers will tell us, is that then people just won't bring forward their land. And so therefore we won't have sites coming forward. And that can be particularly challenging if you have a county of wealthy landowners who think they can, or I say think they can, who can financially wait a generation to bring things forward. I guess the message we've got to put out is that, you know, if we're not delivering the affordable housing and we're not delivering on the climate emergency requirements, then this level of growth doesn't work. So we need to hold strong on those aspects. And if developers aren't willing to bring forward their land, landowners aren't willing to bring forward their land, then it simply won't be allocated, and it will have agricultural value. So there is certainly some robust discussions to take place going forwards to make this work, but we do have to set down sort of a new level of ambition, and I think that aligns with where the Welsh Government's going with its new policies around placemaking, and making the best places and making sure it's the best developments, rather than it being quite so developer-led, perhaps, as some might argue it's been in the past. So we're aligning with that message from the Welsh Government as well. There was another point that Councillor Howard made that's completely slipped my mind. Apologies. So if I pass to Craig to talk about phosphates, perhaps Councillor Howard could type in the chat bar and remind me what the other point was.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Howard, for the question regarding phosphates. In terms of discussions with Welsh Government about improving that infrastructure, those conversations haven't been had, to my knowledge, at this stage. I think in terms of, we have had those conversations with Welsh Water in terms of their AMP programme, in terms of when they're looking to address phosphate stripping capability within Monmouthshire. And I think it's a question of this is impacting on development proposals and economic prosperity of Monmouthshire now, particularly in the north of the county. So we need a solution, notwithstanding the level of growth that is outlined in the LDP. And it is a wider problem than just development proposals and land use. It is about agricultural practices. It is about how we use the land and how we maintain the land. So it's wider than just development. I do think that improving existing infrastructure to treat phosphate along our special areas of conservation rivers is paramount, because it is an issue now. So any reduction in the amount of phosphate is needed, and other rural settlements and rural areas have that phosphate stripping capability. And I would argue that if we don't put it within Monmouthshire's North Counties and our most sustainable settlements, then we aren't addressing the issue, and we are potentially exposing those rural settlements to be further isolated, having detrimental impact on economic growth and social outcomes as well. So I think this issue of phosphate is significant. It needs to be addressed, and it needs funding to do that. Whether that is something that the council needs to engage in more proactively in terms of CPO in agricultural land, or doing any sort of work to bring on ecological solutions, we are looking at all of those options at the moment. So those discussions need to be had, and this is a wider problem which needs to be addressed. And I think improving that public drainage infrastructure is essential, really, not just about the LDP, but the replacement LDP, but also about the existing arrangement on the ground. Some embryotic conversations with Welsh government around whether there can be exceptions and allowances for certain types of developments, such as affordable housing and other elements. I think those conversations are very early stages. I am sitting on a board with Welsh Government, Natural Resources Wales, Welsh Water, trying to look at these solutions, and those conversations will still be had moving forward. But I think in the very short term, that need to upgrade the infrastructure in Monmouth and Abergavenny in particular is essential to just the normal day-to-day growth and development of those rural settlements. And if it doesn't happen, the risk is that those places won't have that ability to prosper.
Chair, I've hopefully remembered the other part of Councillor Howard's question. So I think he was asking in the context of Welsh Government's 48% ambition for the first 5 years of 2040. Oh, there we are. It's just appeared on my screen now. He's typed it in. Thank you. So yeah, the first 10 years of Future Wales 2040, 48% in the first 5 years. So yeah, suggestion is we need far more affordable housing properties that would be financially or physically possible to build. That is a fair challenge. If you do the number crunching on the preferred strategy, there's around 2,500 affordable homes out of 8,000, so you know it's well below that percentage. But part of the 7,000 odd new homes that we're saying are required to meet the growth strategy are already built, because the plan started in 2018. So we've got existing completions, and then we've got consents that are already in the pipeline. So I've already been through planning committee and a part of our 5-year housing land supply, and will come forward. And then there's smaller windfall sites. So with the windfall sites at the moment, with our policy, we get on-site affordable housing if it's more than 3 homes, or a commuted sum if it's fewer than 3 homes. So how that policy approach happens in the future remains to be seen, but I imagine something similar will happen still. So not factored into numbers are the commuted sums that we put together to buy affordable properties in other locations. But if you look at the numbers of the new allocations and then the proportion of those that will be affordable, the percentage is around about 41%, which is back in a far healthier region. This is based on some assumptions. So at the moment, we don't know what the proportion of affordable homes will be on most of the sites. But we do know that we're looking to put in some 50% affordable housing sites as a affordable housing-led arm of the strategy. So we've assumed based on the current 25% and 35% proportions, but again, that needs to be viability assessed and that policy approach agreed. So yeah, in terms of getting that 48%, you know, in the standard way with those sites coming forward and offering affordable housing via Section 106 agreements, I don't think any policy would achieve that level. It's looking at whether those sites are purchased by affordable housing deliverers on a higher percentage, and also our 50% arm of the policy. But no, I agree with the point that Councillor Howard's making. Again, I guess the flip side is if we don't have this growth level, we'll be even further away from delivering affordable housing. So that would be a justification in my eyes for doing what we're proposing.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think I can't see any further hands up. Shout anybody want to make any further comment on this agenda item? Can't see anybody. Right. Okay.
Sorry.
Brian, carry on.
It was just a comment, basically. On Usk, I think Usk, Raglan, and one other site. It's proposed that 240 odd houses be built in those 3 areas over the next 12 years or so. I just wanted to point out, and no doubt this will come up in consultation anyway, that we've recently lost a doctor's surgery, so we're down to 1 surgery now, and the one that is surviving is really busy. The school is more or less at full capacity. Obviously, we've got the problem with the roads throughout Usk, and we've lost the 3 banks that we once had since the last LDP was put into force. So it's just a question really of, I hope that all that would be taken into account when the decisions are made. Thank you, Paul.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. just to confirm that we certainly will take that into account. We have a sustainable settlements appraisal that looks at all those kind of things like amenities and connectivity. We did a resurvey of the amenities and sent it out for each settlement to the town or community council and got their agreement that we'd included everything, you know, hadn't missed anything or incorrectly counted anything. So that will be informed about those changes. We also had the really good session the other week with health board and GP practice representatives explaining their challenges and how we can build on that infrastructure through the planning process. So we're factoring that in. It's worth watching that session if you weren't able to attend. But the health board was actually really keen on the preferred strategy, or sorry, the health board's exaggeration. The representatives at the meeting were keen on the strategy we were talking about in terms of sustaining services and helping balance that demography as well. So it is worth having a look at that if you have time. Chair, I was going to go on.
If I could just mention, for those members of the public who are watching at the moment, there are a number of engagement sessions between now and the 31st of August. And perhaps, Mark, you would like just to say something finally about that?
Yeah, many thanks, Chair. Yeah, there's a number of engagement events taking place. We started on the 5th of July. So there's a lot of information on our website. If you go onto the planning policy pages and look for the preferred strategy consultation section, lots of information on there. A really good place to start is the Easy Read Guide, which is just a short 10 or so page document that tries to illustrate the direction of travel and what we're trying to achieve. And then there's, you know, a large amount of supplementary information and the preferred strategy itself with an executive summary. Appreciate they are big documents though, hence the Easy Read Guide is a good starter. We've already held one virtual session and we've got another one to come. Again, details are on the website of how to get involved in that, and there's a chance to ask questions either in advance or live during the meeting, and they're sort of hosted by our somebody, Kelly or Abby, normally from our comms team, and they've worked quite well. And then thankfully this time, because restrictions being what they are, we're able to do some face-to-face drop-in sessions. So we've had 2 already, I think it might be 3. There's another one this afternoon in Mega, and then others planned. Again, there's a schedule of those. For COVID restriction purposes, we do ask people to pre-book, but there's plenty of space for people to come along. There's paper documents there for people to look at, and colleagues there to ask questions as required. So it's very informal, just if you can book, but then it's for you to drop in, have a look at the information, ask whatever questions you may have, and then you can use that to inform any comments you wish to make. It probably goes without saying, but we do need any comments to be in writing for us to formally consider them. And there's information on the website about how you do that. A good old-fashioned pen and paper letter is still acceptable and can be sent into the planning policy team at the County Hall address, and we'll gather all of those together as well. But our preferred option, if people can do it, is to register with the system. We have the online system and enter your comments online. It's not too much effort to do, hopefully, but it is helpful for us because then your responses are automatically populated into our system, and there's no issues with us retyping letters or emails or inadvertently missing the point that you're trying to make, or making errors. So if people can use that system, that really helps us out and makes it more efficient and more accurate for us. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much, Mark and Craig, for your input this morning. And I think we'll now move on to agenda item number 6, as to the scrutiny of the Revenue and Capital Outturn Report 2020-2021. I think that's probably Peter Davis or John Davis, maybe.
Good afternoon, Chair. It's not Pete or
it's
John
not.
Today, unfortunately. They're otherwise engaged. Yeah, morning all. We are still morning. Yeah, I'm Dave Loader from Central Finance. So I'm here to present the report today. Obviously, it's there's quite a lot of documents and it's a rather long report. So what I thought I would do is put some of the main summary points onto a slide deck. So if you just allow me to share my screen. Right, where is it? No, it's the wrong one. Apologies, baby. Yeah, so can we see that?
Yeah, we can see that.
Yeah, okay. Right, so this is a revenue capital outturn report, obviously for last financial year, and it got presented to Cabinet on the 9th of June. So the revenue budget, we actually returned a net revenue break-even position for last financial year. Now that was after accounting for transfers into earmarked reserves. Obviously this is an improvement of 5.15 million from what we said at month 9. Now what the figures that we did report in month 9 did include the effects of any COVID expenditure income issues that we didn't know whether we get funding from Welsh Government for, but obviously that was then provided by Welsh Government. So one of the reasons for the swing from month 9 to outturn is that we actually received 5.29 million of Welsh Government hardship fund monies. But on top of that, we also received significant amounts of Welsh Government grants that arrived fairly late on in the year, or we were able to passport core revenue costs across the grant as well. So that was one of the other reasons why our outturn swung quite a lot. And also, as we pushed through to year end, there were savings within services, as obviously operations were stopped, or we made saving on mileage requirements because staff weren't travelling. You know, we had building closures because of the pandemic. So through to year end, we also seen quite large service swings within services. Okay, so in total, the authority received £22.7 million worth of COVID funding. That's mainly down to two areas, which is 11.25 million of direct COVID expenditure reimbursement and 8.38 million of compensation for income loss. There is a detailed breakdown of all the different funding streams that we had, can be found in table 3.17. So the authority was able to earmark, or to put 4.119 million into earmark reserves. I think there's a recommendation in the report that asks members to endorse the reserve strategy, the reserve replenishment strategy. Obviously, members are aware of the difficult financial challenges that we are having and we are going to have in the future. So ultimately, if we can put some of that surplus to reserves to help cope with those issues that we have going forward, then that's prudent. There's just a little table there that shows the types of why there was a swing from what we said in month 9. You can see there the levels of grant that came in during the latter stage of the year, which pushed us from a break-even position to an over a £4.1 million surplus. So just quickly, there's a couple of paragraphs in the main report about the use of reserves. I think there's a recommendation. Ultimately, members need to recognise that last year was an extraordinary year, and in effect this year is the same. In a way, it probably masks some of the recurring pressures that the authorities were facing anyway. And in paragraph 3.22, it just states that in this year's budget round we had to accommodate £10.3 million worth of pressures. You know, we've still got those issues with social services, children's social services, adult social care. We do seem to keep having operational pressures within some of our operational departments, such as passenger transport, recycling and waste. we've have to, because of a change in policy by Welsh Government, we are spending a lot more on accommodating our homeless people at the moment. So, those pressures are still there. They will need to be managed. And by putting some money aside in reserves, that will help us manage those pressures when they arrive going forward. Obviously, the COVID-19 pandemic is still affecting services this year, so we may have to fund anything after the 30th of September. So at the moment, Welsh Government have only guaranteed that they will fund any COVID-related costs or income loss up to the end of September. Some services will see effects post-September, so we do need to be mindful that we could see a pressure at year end, which needs to be financed. Authority savings, despite the pandemic, we were able to hit 85% of the savings target, with 734,000 being reported as delayed or unachievable by service managers. There is a list of all those savings and the performance against each one in Appendix 2. Just quickly on school balances, there was a significant increase in school balances from in last financial year. They actually increased by 3.85 million. You can see that at the start of the year, the overall net deficit for schools of 435,000, but it then moved into a surplus of 3.42 million. Main reasons for that: they received a lot of grants from Welsh Government, but also they found that because the buildings were closed, they weren't spending much of their annual budgets anyway, so they were finding savings through that as well. Appendix 4 is a list of individual school balances, and just a note there that 15 of the 17 schools that entered the year in deficit have now returned to surplus balance. So we have seen a big uplift in school balances. Authority capital expenditure, at outturn, the authority spent 19 million. That was a 3.18 million underspend against budget. That's mainly down to two areas. We didn't have to draw on our full capitalisation budget, so that underspent, and we also underspent on some grant related schemes. Because of the underspend against the capitalisation directive, we were able to release 1.08 million of capital receipts back to reserve for future capital investment. Capital slippage, a large amount there, 49.92 million. So managers have requested that we slip just under 50 million pounds into this financial year. The whole list of that is in Appendix 5. Obviously, a lot of the schemes were delayed because of COVID-19. Obviously, with social distance, etc., a lot of schemes had to be put on hold because we couldn't get access to buildings. There were some schemes as well that were delayed because of the bad weather as well that we had in December and January. 49.92 million is a large amount, but almost 2/3 of that can be put down to two schemes, which is the Asset Investment Fund and obviously the new school in Abergavenny. So moving on to the E&D portfolio specifically. So there's a report there, specific report for E&D at Appendix 6. So that's got some more detailed explanations, and it also holds the director's commentary to give you some more information. Was heavily impacted by COVID-19. This area, circa £8 million worth of COVID funding, and that has been split down between 2.14 million expenditure recovery. The main areas for that, recovery and expenditure in homelessness, public health, which is the track and trace, and non-life, and then COVID income loss, 5.854 million. Main areas in that are the lost car park income, investments income, registrars, and lost income from our leisure sites. So the non-COVID underspend was 707,000 at year end for this portfolio. Now that 707 form part of the 4.119 billion surplus that went to reserves. I just put down some of the main areas. So we had a £67,000 underspend in public protection. That's mainly down to reduced activity because of COVID. Planning policy and builder control, £239,000 underspend. We've just been talking about the LDP. Obviously, there's a budget held for costs relating to LDP. As that's been delayed, we obviously haven't spent as much on professional fees, consultants, etc. So there's an underspend there, but we did also have some staff vacancies that pushed the underspend up. Housing, we were able to fund some staff costs from grants, so that benefited the budget, but we also seen an underspend in our shared housing and private lodging schemes where net rental exceeded our budgeted target. Highways development and flooding, quite a large underspend of £211,000. We did have some improved income in some areas, but we also have a number of staff vacancies within that unit that did benefit the bottom line. Monlife, across all of the leisure services within Monlife, there's a £206,000 underspend. Again, there's a fair number of staff vacancies across the service, so that accounted for most of that underspend. Landlord services as a whole, £44,000 underspent, but could be split down between investments. Now that £200,000 overspend relates specifically to a budget saving that we built into the budget for last financial year. Now that related to additional purchases that would help bring more income in. Now obviously no additional purchases were undertaken primarily due to COVID, so that saving could not be achieved. But Newport Leisure Park and Castlegate have both returned break-even budgets. Solar farm and sustainability, £97,000 underspent, predominantly down to our renewables outperforming the budgeted targets. We've got some staff vacancies in the estates of £22,000. Property services and facilities management, £109,000 underspend. Again, we've seen some savings in our accommodation budgets due to the buildings being closed. We were also able to passport schools expenditure out of our corporate building maintenance pot that could go against a Welsh Government grant that we received in the latter half of the year, which was the schools refurbishment grant, so we were able to push costs against that as well. So that produced a benefit. So that's most of the underspends. There are a couple of main overspends. Car parks, so most of our car parks overspend was related to lost income. We were able to claim that back from Welsh Government, but we did have some expenditure that we couldn't claim back, and that was pushed us into £108,000 overspend. We've seen our car park rates go up over budget. Transport costs and supplies and services have increased over budget as well. Business growth and enterprise had a £34,000 overspend on there, and we've also had an £83,000 overspend within Future Monmouthshire, which is corporate agency and mileage savings that were held in this service that I wouldn't say weren't achieved, but were not passported back across to services, so they remained on the Future Mon budget heading. And I think that's it. So I think that's it. Thank you, Chair. So I'm happy to take any questions. I don't think there are any officers left.
Possibly not.
Yeah, so I'll try my best. If I can't answer any service specific, I'll take it back to the relevant officer.
Yeah,
and I'll pass some stuff back. Thanks.
I've got a couple of questions, if I can go first. I note from the schedule of specifically for economy development that we've got commercial and corporate landlord services. There's an underspend of 852,000. Well, in a previous discussion today, I was referring to the fact that we don't actually have any available commercial accommodation at the moment. Perhaps the 852,000 shortfall could be spent on making some shovel-ready accommodation ready for those businesses to move into Monmouthshire. I don't know if you're the officer who's able to respond to that, but if not, perhaps you could take it back to the appropriate officer. And the other point I was going to make is that there's a shortfall in estates of 22,000 because of staff shortages. We have a significant issue, I believe, in being able to shift some of our commercial property. For example, the TIC in Abergavenny and various other properties that are within our ownership but are lying idle. Perhaps if they were utilised more profitably, the underspend in estates could be rather more significant, in that we could get some revenue from those units under occupied. Again, whether that's your pigeon or not, I'm not sure. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And unfortunately, they're rather service-specific queries. So your first one about the £852,000 underspend against commercial investments, I'll have to just double check that. But what I'll do, I'll go back to the relevant officers and I'll provide some response, or ask them to provide you with a response.
I'm looking at table 2, Economy Development Select 2021 outturn detailed statement, and that's the figure that's in there. So just get somebody to come back to me. Members, do I have any queries from any member? I can't see any hands up. No. Right. That being the case, if there's no further queries, Dave, thanks very much for your contribution there.
Okay, thank you, Chair.
We let off very lightly, I think. Yes. If we can move on then to agenda item number 7, the forward work plan. That's the schedule there. Note that the workshops, the local development plan workshops, don't appear whilst they're in this schedule. I think they've been delayed now until September. So the one referred to on the 22nd of June obviously was dealt with, but there's no further ones until September. Any comments there, members? There's the special workshop, if I can remind you, on the 26th. That's to deal with the reopening of high streets. Right, nothing there. No queries there from anybody. Good. We can look at the council and cabinet work planner. Anybody got any comments there or observations? No. Nobody wants to say anything? No. Then finally, then, if we can go to the penultimate, to confirm the minutes of the previous meeting, agenda number 9. Can I have a seconder for that?
I'd be happy to second, Chair.
Thank you, Richard. And then the date of the next meeting is the 16th of September at 10 o'clock, but we've got the special committee meeting on the 26th of this month at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So hopefully all those members who are still attending here can attend that meeting. I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, any members of the public who are still looking on, in fact, remind them that the local development plan consultation is open until the 31st of August, and all observations and comments are more than welcome. If you can do it online, it can be incorporated within the council scheme. So at that stage, I think we've reached an end to this meeting. Thank you very much for everybody attending, officers, members and members of the public, and have a good afternoon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Bye,
and everyone else. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye-bye.